And so when I started to hear about these other types of mushrooms that are totally legal and considered functional or medicinal, and had been used for thousands of years in ancient Chinese medicine, I was curious because it made sense to me in my mind. So for 1 month, I went off of like all other supplementation, like vitamins. I wasn't drinking caffeine, and I just drank basically mushroom teas. So I was just like only supplementing with these mushroom teas. And that month
Wow.
was like one of the best months of how I felt across that 18-month experiment.
This is Evolve CPG's Brands for a Better World podcast, featuring purpose-driven leaders who not only believe in better, but actively pursue it. That's better products, better brands, and better leadership for a better world. Thanks to you, our listeners, this podcast is now ranked in the top 10% of all podcasts globally. Let's not stop there, though. You can help us reach more people by taking a moment to leave us a rating or review, which is critical for podcast algorithms, and by sharing your favorite episodes with your network. The more people we reach, the more good we can bring about in this world. If you work in the industry, you can also join our online community where we're going further, faster, together at community.evolvecpg.com. I'm your host, Gage Mitchell, founder and creative director of Modern Species, a sustainable brand design agency helping better brands grow and scale their impact. On this episode, we're speaking with Parker Olson, founder of Forij, about his 18-month food experiment that led him to weaving functional mushrooms into his diet, how his business idea spontaneously came to him at a networking event, why he slept in a tent for 2 years, what the future of functional food looks like, and more.
My name's Parker. I'm the founder of Forij, where we make nutrition for your noggin, or more recently coined noggin nutrition is something we are flirting with.
Nice. That sounds like a trademark waiting to happen right there.
Ugh.
I like it. So thanks for popping on. I'm excited to chat and dig a little bit deeper into your story. But one thing that intrigued me when I was poking around and doing a little research is I noticed that your current journey seemed to start when you decided to do a nutrition experiment on yourself, like you're Tim Ferriss or something like that, writing a book.
Yeah,
So I'm curious, what inspired that experiment?
It's funny you say that. I definitely used to be a huge Tim Ferriss nerd, like the only podcast I would listen to, and probably am sort of like a closet biohacker a little bit. I'm almost embarrassed to admit.
Totally.
But yeah, I was never into food, wasn't really into nutrition. And I still remember I was in college. My oldest brother was living in Minneapolis at the time, and I was at school at the University of Minnesota, and we were going to the gym. And he was telling me that he was trying this new thing that he had heard about called the Whole30 diet. Have you heard of this? I assume it's like, I feel like it's pretty mainstream. Yeah. So it's basically, it's a specific type of diet. You cut out processed foods, grains, sugars, etc. And he was talking about how you are supposed to get something that's called the tiger blood. Have you heard about this?
I don't know if I know about that other than, what was it, Charlie Sheen going off about tiger blood for a little while.
Yeah, probably mocking it.
On his rants.
Yeah, so the tiger blood, which he claims that he got. And tiger blood, if you go onto Reddit and you search tiger blood, basically like your body is supposedly operating at maximum efficiency, and you basically like requires less sleep, like all your senses are sort of impacted and elevated. So like, you notice like better eye vision, you're like stronger, you're sort of quicker minded. And I was kind of intrigued, and I'm still a junior in college, poor, wasn't necessarily the healthiest person, but really like eating was very transactional to me, just trying to like eat as quickly and as cheaply as possible. Until once I graduated college, and everybody was kind of talking about vegan, that sort of diet, and I didn't totally get it. I understood like the environmental concerns, like, on here, I know we talk a lot environmentally. But I didn't understand people who that wasn't the use case. They were vegan just because they wanted to be vegan.
Yeah.
So I decided that I would try it. Like if there's a cohort of people doing this, like I kind of just want to understand why. And it was
Yeah.
sort of inspired by like what my brother told me of like, oh, I did this diet and I saw this effect. So I thought, okay, that it makes enough sense. So for 30 days, I went vegan, and I was kind of just documenting how I felt. And it was the first 17 days was really like what I found to be like the break point. Were just like kind of tough. Like you had cravings. It wasn't quite like a perfect routine yet. I didn't like love the food. I was often hungry. I was almost like having like withdrawals from things that I couldn't be consuming. And then right around after that 17-day mark and until the 30-day mark, like I felt good. I definitely noticed a difference in how I felt. And I kind of liked it. Like it was sort of fun. It was sort of just this like daily
Yeah.
challenge in a way. So, no surprise, Gage. You eat well, and I was eating clean vegan, so I wasn't just eating crap. And you feel good, right? It's not that surprising. So, anyways, I decided I would do it again, and that turned into 18 months of individual like 30-day.
Oh my
For the
God.
first 12, it was nutritional regiments strictly, and then after 12 months, I kind of experimented with like more lifestyle, like 30-day components. So that was sort of like the opening journey of myself founding a health food company.
Wow. Okay. So it started off with 30 days. And first off, you said you went vegan, but like clean vegan. So were you on a specific elimination diet or something like that? Like not just vegan, but also avoiding certain potential harmful vegetables or other kind of plants
No,
like nightshades, etc.
no, I was just like trying to be vegan and just trying to eat like good food. Like I wasn't just gonna go buy like vegan crap snacks and just like live off
Yeah.
of those. Was
Okay.
trying to like
Just
really like
quality
yeah.
vegan. Okay.
hmm
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And
So
then that experiment turned into an 18-month experiment. So obviously, you just mentioned that they were like little micro experiments within. So did you have like a system in there where you were systematically trying introducing different things back into your diet each month, or were you going deeper into the veganism and just do
uh,
like eating fruit only or something like that?
well, so I like that you bring that up because I wasn't necessarily I'm not the smartest, I'm not the brightest guy in the room, Gage. I'm just gonna throw myself into it and then figure out how to tread water typically. And so no,
Yeah.
I wasn't systematically or very thoughtful about switching diets, and that was a big takeaway for me was so I went from being vegan and then I went and tried the keto diet immediately after, and the first 14 to 17 days of that were like pretty miserable. And I
Oh
noticed
wow.
that like every month, like the first week or two was definitely, pretty challenging. And like oftentimes I wouldn't feel very good or would have really low energy or like loose stool um, until my body adjusted. And that was like definitely a takeaway for me, which was find a nutritional regimen where you're going to feel good and you can essentially like sustain it, like doing something for 30 days or 45 days or 2 months and then reverting, like your whole
Yeah.
body biochemistry shifts around and you just feel horrible. So that was definitely a takeaway for me. I probably could have done it in a smarter manner, but I wasn't that clever, Gage.
Gotcha. And I know part of this journey was your discovery of mushrooms as well and the functionality of mushrooms. And I think I saw in your LinkedIn profile that you were at a certain period of time on the Puget Sound Mycological Society board.
hmm
So did you find mushrooms through this journey, just get really interested and then join that board? Or were you already somehow interested in mushrooms and
Yeah.
in that board role? Like what were you doing on that board?
Yeah, that's right. So after these like kind of 12 months of like strict like Atkins diet, right? Like standard diets, I sort of started to experiment elsewise, and something started to see and read a lot about were like it was like mushroom coffee, right? This was back in 2018, I think it was 2018. And my background in education, I double majored in neuroscience and finance. So I have a background in neuroscience, and for an entire year during my college education, we spent just studying like what different drugs do to the brain, and basically like learned what psychedelics do on a fundamental level. And why the only reason I bring that up is to say like I have an understanding that mushrooms can impact how you're feeling and your nervous system on a pretty fundamental level. And so when I started to hear about these other types of mushrooms that are totally legal and considered functional or medicinal, and had been used for thousands of years in ancient Chinese medicine, I was curious because it made sense to me in my mind. So for 1 month, I went off of like all other supplementation, like vitamins. I wasn't drinking caffeine, and I just drank basically mushroom teas. So I was just like only supplementing with these mushroom teas. And that month
Wow.
was like one of the best months of how I felt across that 18-month experiment. Um,
Oh, geez. Okay.
so yeah, I like kind of went all in, and that was eye opening for me. And as I was feeling really good during that month, I started to dig into the research and like started to read some of like the studies and get into some of the neuroscience and down to like the biological level, and became pretty compelled by really what a lot of these mushrooms can do for you from a health standpoint, and a lot of really like low hanging fruit, or low hanging medical concerns that I believe they can really solve or really help with kind of across the population. So that was sort of like the intro for me, and then I went on this month journey, and after that became really interested in mushrooms, and so I joined the Puget Sound Mycological Society, which is the largest mushroom club or society in the U.S. And then I ended up sitting on the board there for close to 2 years.
Wow, that's amazing. So for the mushroom experiment, you said that you ate nothing but mushroom teas, or were you just only drinking mushroom teas? Like no
just
caffeine,
only
but
drinking mushroom teas.
I was other food.
I was still eating. Yes, I was eating kind of just like a normal
Okay.
diet. Like I wasn't trying to like stick to anything extreme. It was just like the only variable I was controlling for was like the consumption of
Gotcha.
mushroom tea. Yeah.
Okay. And were you making your own mushroom teas, like just getting dried mushrooms and steeping them yourself, or was there a brand that you bought?
So yeah, for a while I was drinking like mud water, which I feel like it has almost become like commonplace in a lot of ways. They've just spent so many ad dollars. And
Yeah,
I
totally.
honestly I didn't like love that. I don't love the product, like the actual taste of that product, like drinking it every day. So I ended up making my own teas for a while, and then kind of towards the end got into sourcing like my own mushrooms, and then I was putting them in my oatmeal in the morning. And so I kind of like transitioned around a little bit.
Gotcha. Okay, that explains your first product, which we'll get to in a little bit. But before we get there, can you talk about your kind of role on the board? Like what do you do as a board member of the
Good question.
Mycological Society?
Yeah, so I was, and I believe I still am. I believe I still hold the youngest board member ever in the society, which I kind of say tongue in cheek because that group, and as you can imagine, mushroom foraging is a kind of an old person sport, I'll say, or just traditionally.
Yeah.
And so, the board was definitely, composed of people, I think the average age of the board was like upper 60s. And so, yeah, we would meet twice a month, and basically, we were working on strategic initiatives. We would plan they host a big mushroom show twice a year, Mushroom Mania in the fall, and I forget the name of the spring one. They hold 10 to 15 field trips every single year, so there's just some logistical navigation there. And then finally, and where I was most intrigued by is they're actually sitting on, I will say, like a decent amount of capital. And so it was discussing like how to actually deploy their capital. And a lot of, member dues for the year are $20. So you kind of wonder like, how do they actually collect money? A, they have super low expenses, but B, they've received in-kind donations of land in the past that I think they've then sold to the state that have opened up like state parks. So they actually have some kind of cool assets under management.
Wow, that's really cool. I wouldn't have guessed that they had owned land. It's, I've been on lots of nonprofit boards. Most of them, all their revenue just comes from membership dollars. The smart ones start having some sort of services or other value add kind of thing that they can charge for to offset membership dollars. So they're not begging for money all the time from sponsors and stuff. But owning land, that's pretty cool, especially when it's gifted. That's amazing. Actually, I'm on the board of my homeowners association, and pretty much the only reason it exists, because in our division or in our neighborhood, there's three divisions, I think. The other two divisions, HOAs, completely went away. The reason we still have ours is because the HOA owns property, like land up near we call it the park and the beach area, because there's these steps that go down to a beach on the bay. And then there's a strip of land that goes along our creek that runs through my kind of backyard area that the HOA owns, which part of why I like this neighborhood is that nobody can touch that land, and it'll always stay kind of pristine nature.
That's cool.
Yeah. But it's I think that's like the only reason we exist at this point, really, is to maintain that land. But we're not making money off of it. But it's cool that they were able to get some land donations.
Totally.
Awesome. So any mushroom hunters out there, go find your mycological society, I guess, and join up. That sounds cool. I'm going to have to actually look into some events myself, considering I'm in Paul Stament's backyard over here. So may as well check it out. So with that said, you hinted that part of your mushroom experiment was, starting to weave food or mushrooms into your food, starting with your breakfast with your oatmeal or granolas, and then you decided to launch Forij somewhere in there. So tell us a little bit about why you decided to launch a company, why you decided to focus on these mushrooms. I think you've hinted at that already. You were impressed by their health benefits, but you still could have done anything. And then why did you start with these specific products?
Yeah, all good questions. So for me, like the kind of the experimentation was just exciting to me. I wasn't super excited by my other job, and I had always been entrepreneurial in the past. I've started a couple of more like solopreneur projects in the past that I've gone through or monetized in some way, or sold or gotten stolen from me, which is a whole other story. But definitely there was some draw to mushrooms that I was super compelled by. That it was like, I loved mushroom foraging. I loved the way that these mushrooms made me feel. And so it was something that happened really organically. As I mentioned, I was kind of making my own oatmeal towards the end. And that was because I didn't love the taste of a lot of the teas. And so I wanted to get it into kind of like a food format, something that I could kind of eat daily that would be super healthy and something that I would really enjoy. Additionally, around that time is when I was starting to train for a full Ironman. So 6 days a week training, 2 a days for 3 of those days. And so for me, it was I was applying structure around my nutrition of okay, I want to eat really clean. I want to eat whole food ingredients. That was a big takeaway for me from my 18-month journey. And I want to get these mushrooms into my diet every day. So I kind of started with oatmeal, and I was bringing it into my office. And then I started making granola because it was just a little bit more convenient and it would last. And I started just bringing it into my office, and I was asking people to try it. And, at first they were like, this tastes like crap. I was like, okay, fair enough. and then I kind of leveled up, and my roommate's sister was a really talented baker, and she was staying with us for a couple months, and she ended up coming up with some legitimate recipes and was like, we're going to level this up. So she kind of helped level up the initial recipes, and then I started bringing them into the office, and people were really liking them. And they're like, yeah, this is really good. I can't even taste mushrooms. This is super cool. And so I was like, okay, cool. And was still just making it for my own. And, was kind of just having fun, experimenting, I'll run a little survey and see what responses I get from people in my office. And then I found myself at a startup conference in Oakland, and in December of 2018 or in 2019, the years fly. And I was having a random conversation, and then at those events, everybody wants to ask what's your thing you're working on? And I wasn't working on any cool thing. And so I kind of made it up. I kind of lied. And I said, I did, I lied. And then I said that I was making the first mushroom based food product or concept or something. And 8 out of 10 people looked at me and were very confused and were wondering if I was trying to sell them drugs. And then, there was one or two that were like, oh, that's really cool. And one guy who was an angel investor there was like, that's sick. Like that's going to be huge. Like that market is really going to grow. Like I know a lot about these mushrooms too. And we kind of like nerded out over it for a while. And then he went and brought me over to the guy who held the conference. His name's Sam Parr. Some people may follow him. And like there were like 15 people like suckling at his teat around him at this networking happy hour. And everyone's just like trying to get his card. And this guy comes in and like cuts everybody off and introduces us. And then he's like, tell him what you're doing. And I told him, and Sam was like, oh yeah, like I'm like all in on the mushroom space. Like I think that's gonna be huge in like 3 to 10 years. Like here's my card. And it gave me my card, and everybody was like kind of rattled that it was standing around. And so
everyone like, what the hell?
Yeah,
I'm working on mushrooms too.
Yeah. And so then this angel investor was like, hey, send me your pitch deck. And I was like, oh yeah, for sure, I'll send it to you when I get back. And like
totally, yeah.
Didn't even have a brand, like didn't even have like a full product, didn't have anything. But what I did have was PowerPoint skills and the ability to go on Fiverr to hire somebody to make a brand. And so that I went home that night, found somebody on Fiverr to make a logo, like put together like a pitch deck and sent it to him. And then in the meantime, like while we're discussing and he's sharing it around and he's looking at it, I was like, okay, well, I'd better start trying to sell the product. Like, I don't know what else to do. So then I went and I started like selling it to local cafes, and it kind of spiraled. It spiraled way out of control from there, Gage.
Sounds like it. I'm loving this. First off, it sounds like the ultimate fake it till you make it. But like most people, even with that statement, which I've been lately reframing to believe in yourself before you know you can do it, right? That's ultimately what you're doing with fake it till you make it. You're like, I can do this. I don't know it. I'll figure it out. So I'm just going to go out there and act like I have confidence, even though I'm still learning. But for you, it was like a literal fake it. Like you didn't have an answer to give, so you kind of made one up. But people loved it enough that it kind of pushed you down that path, which is kind of a cool serendipity there.
You have to will it into existence.
One thing I wanted to ask before I dig deeper. Yeah, totally. But before we dig deeper there, I'm super curious. I think you said it was your sister that helped you kind of reformulate your granola when you were just kind of doing it for your own use. So what was an aha, if it's not some sort of trade secret and you can share it, what was like an aha tweak to your formulation that made it go from crap to tasty?
Yeah. So it was my roommate's sister, and she like does some food science stuff now as well. And we also did some consulting with a food scientist, like towards, when we were really starting to like put real product together. And I will share it. Like it's not I don't know, maybe my like lawyer or like other people would suggest that I don't talk about it, but that's not my style. Is we discovered that, and we were really indexing on using whole food ingredients and keeping it low sugar. And there were some challenges around having it be sweet enough and also like mask sort of some of this mushroom flavor effectively with low sugar. And we discovered that using like certain types of fats and really potent spice like recreates this like sweetness sensation in your mouth. So we use like really, really rich and kind of some particular coconut fats, and so oil and chips and whatnot, and then really like think super potent spices like cloves and nutmeg, and it almost recreates, like it creates some sort of like the science breaks down for me, but the food scientist was explaining that it recreates this almost like sweetness sensation in the mouth from like the fat and like the piercing flavor. That's about as much scientific knowledge as I could totally give you, but we kind of landed on that. And so at the base of all of our granola concepts, like really is like they're all rich in fat. We have a high fat product. It's all healthy fat. And then we use potent spice as well.
Nice. Okay. So it wasn't so much you found some way to make mushrooms themselves taste good, like with some patent drying process or I don't know, whatever, but it was more about finding creative ways to make the whole granola, the whole formulation taste better without a ton of sugar.
Right. And I will say, like, there was definitely like a good amount of process engineering or just like process iteration that we had to go through around the mushrooms, but that was more so to ensure like active compounds post-production. So like if the processing is too harsh, like it will essentially destroy the active medicinal compounds, which is what like you're really looking for when you consume these mushrooms. And so there definitely was some processing around that specifically, but not necessarily flavor.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So do you continuously test for those active compounds? Is that part of your ongoing process?
We don't test every batch. We'll test. We've in the past we like tested and like we were testing and iterating and testing until we got it right, and then when we brought it to scale,
Gotcha.
tested, and then it was like okay, like we feel confident now. And then we tested
Cool.
once last year as well. So like we're not testing every single time because we feel pretty accurate about the process and like that it's within its constraints. And feel like we understand some of the factors, but we'll probably continue to test like once a year. I think is like we don't have a ton of budget to just be randomly testing these things, but as long as we're not seeing variants, like I don't see a whole lot of reason to test more than that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. I know testing is getting to be a really popular thing in the food world. Most people are doing the testing more for like glyphosate or other heavy metals or something like that that might be in food. But I could also see with the functional food movement growing, I could see people being more transparent and having ongoing testing about the function of the food to prove that, it is what we say it is. And maybe even, I think a lot of the debate around some functional foods is how much of it your body even absorbs. It's like one
Right.
thing if that packaged product has all these nutrients in it, but it's another thing if you can actually get that to be absorbed into your bloodstream and to be functional, right? So I
Totally.
think that would be one of my predictions for the future of functional food and regenerative agriculture will be more nutrient density testing
Hmm.
to make, and then hopefully getting some studies funded to make sure whatever you're consuming sticks with you and is absorbed.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're right. Bioavailability is like a whole other conversation. So our mushroom mix that we use now, we use like a proprietary vitamin D brown button. So like you go to the store, like you buy like a brown button mushroom. It's that concept, but it's exposed to a special type of ultraviolet light and under certain conditions that enables it to basically like produce a shitload of vitamin D. And so we also test for vitamin D like post production. And again, like from what I understand about it is that it's one of the most bioavailable vitamin D sources you can consume outside of like sunlight, but of physical actual
Nice.
consumption. Where like mushroom vitamin D is like way more bioavailable than plant vitamin D. From what I understand. So I hear you on that, and like we definitely kind of think about it, and I think it's a challenge across the industry.
Yeah, totally. Makes sense. Cool. So we started touching on the kind of scrappy startup entrepreneurial journey you've been on with the kind of stumbling into pitching some influential people who wanted your deck and then quickly, getting a logo and pitch deck together. And as your journey's unfolded, as I've been kind of hearing more and more of your story through following you on LinkedIn, I've noticed you've continued that scrappy spirit in many ways. I think I saw a Facebook ad or something that you put out about you kind of like sleeping in your backyard in a tent or something like that for the first year or something. And I know you've got your Forij van where either you or one of your team members might be sleeping out of it in a Walmart parking lot or something like that while you're on the road talking to retailers. So of anyone I know in the CPG space, I feel like you're truly living that kind of scrappy entrepreneur lifestyle. But can you talk a little bit about your journey so far and some of those defining like experiences or moments that you think
Yeah.
are either lessons learned or just fun stories?
Yeah. um, yeah. I definitely. I think I pride myself on some of that for sure. And honestly, like it's fun. I've got the rest. I feel like I'm a little bit taking advantage of my age, where like I feel like it gets to a certain
Yeah,
point where
right.
like you just like can't be as scrappy or not seen as like as attractive. I don't know why. Maybe I'm speculating, but yeah, like I think I'll have the rest of my life to live in comfort and luxury, and so why not take advantage of while I can do it otherwise right now, I suppose. But yeah, so I guess a couple like quick hitters that are claims to scrappy fame. Um, I slept, yeah,
Claims of
yes.
scrappy fame. I love
So
it.
one day I just decided that, and my room was overflowing with like finished good product, like raw ingredients, like it was not good, and like a desk, and I was still working my full-time job, and my mental health was really plummeting. And so I thought, and actually part of this 18-month experiment the year prior, I slept outside for a month. And so I said, you know what?
Ah,
Fuck it. I'm moving to the backyard. And so I just like pitched a tent one day. I still remember the day. It was mid-March. I think it was March 17th. And I was on a phone call for work for my other work and was just so bored. And I was like, okay, I'm pitching the tent. I'm sleeping outside tonight and like this will just be good. And then I ended up sleeping in the tent for 2 years outside. I threw out my
oh my
bed.
God, 2 years.
I threw out the bed and transformed the bedroom into like a little office, like headquarters. We had like a little storage area, and then we had desks, and we got some interns from University of Washington. And like, I still also remember the first day they showed up for like their internship, like at their like corporate job. And I was a little nervous because I'm
And the
like, oh,
boss
like,
rolls out of his tent.
yeah, like I'm like, what are they gonna think when they roll up and it's like in my old bedroom? And the first day they come in and I got them these cool like 3D printed like notebooks and they each had like snacks and they each had their own desk. It was
Oh,
sick.
nice.
And they
That's
got
cool.
there and they kind of look around and they're like, "Oh, so like this is a house." And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, like and I can park anywhere on the street?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, this is way better than our friends' internships. Like they have to pay for parking downtown, like they have to like dress up." And they were both like super excited about the idea of like
Nice.
working here, and it was just ended up working out super awesome. They like loved and thought it was hilarious that I was in the tent. Um, and so yeah, it ended up being pretty ideal, but I was not planning on sleeping in the tent for 2 years, but transparently like I didn't have an end goal in mind. It was like, okay, I'm moving to the tent. Like I don't know what's next, but I'm going to move to the tent because this feels like the best thing for my personal health and like the business. And so I'm going to do it. So I did that for close to 2 years. And I came to really enjoy it, Gage. I'll be super transparent. Some of the best sleep I've ever gotten was out there in that
Yeah.
tent. And then after that, we raised some funding, kind of some more legitimate funding towards the end, and then it was like, okay, like we got some distribution opportunities, and it was like, okay, like this, let's see what we can do, move into some retail and just go learn and like meet the different retailers around the country. And so I originally bought a pop top camper that was on top of my car. You know what I'm talking about? Like you like pull some
Yeah.
string and it
Yeah.
like pops up and it's just like on tracks on top. And I slept out of that for like a couple days and it was pretty tight. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is gonna be tight driving around the country living out of this thing. But okay, like whatever. And then like a week later, his name's Nick Mendoza, who I share an office with him downtown in Seattle. He bought this Japanese import van and it looked sick and it was super affordable. And I did some research and some of them are super reliable, considered to be like super well built back in the 90s and early 2000s. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go buy one of those. And so I sold my own car to afford to buy the Forij van. So I bought it with my own money. I actually personally own the Forij van. And I sold this rooftop pop
Nice.
top camper. And within 2 weeks, I bought this Japanese import like pop top camper. So you hit a button and like the roof comes up and you can crawl up to the upper space and sleep. I within 2 weeks, I sold my car, bought that pop top camper, and then I got it wrapped in Forge branding, and then I left and hit the road. And so I went from like 2 years in the tent, bought this van super quick, and then I didn't even have a bed set up top when I left. And I started driving south down to California, and I had to like figure out how to like make a bed up there on the fly on the road. And then I ended up spending about a year on the road in total. So living on the road, drove around the
Dang.
country, was sleeping in grocery store parking lots, the whole shebang, Gage.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs start their business out of a garage or a bedroom or, something like that. In fact, even my agency, Modern Species, for the first 2 or 3 years, we were running it out of our apartment, like either out of a bedroom or we at some point just actually converted the living room to be
Nice.
to be the office and packed our lives into the bedrooms. But there's few people who I think take that dedication to the next level and decide to give their entire living space to their business and opt to live outside or, take the business on the road. So I think those are just amazing stories showing both your scrappiness and your commitment. And I totally agree with what you're saying that, take advantage of your age while you can, because the older you get, the harder it is to sleep in strange conditions, or the more obligations you have,
Right.
or the more stuff you own, and therefore the more you're like tied to a specific location. So I think that's smart to like build something and be scrappy while you can. And then, you've got the rest of your life to increase levels of comfort. And that makes sense.
Like I want to be like a stay-at-home dad building tree houses for my kids. You know what I mean? Like that's my future. But for now, I'm happy to live on the road and scrape by because it's all part of the fun,
Yeah. And I don't know if he's still doing it, but Turner Wyatt, the former CEO of the Upcycled Food Association, he was running a side business called, I think it was Dirtbag Vans, where he was literally importing Japanese like camper vans and like fixing them up and selling them to people. So
okay, I just pulled it up. Yeah. He's selling Delicas, which is a super nice Japanese van. The Japanese van market is really interesting for people that are intrigued. The thing that scares the vast majority of people off, which is so silly, Gage, is the fact that the driving wheel is on the other side. I picked the van up and I had never driven it before, and then I lived out of it for a full year. And I'll tell you, it took me like 2.5 hours, or maybe like 3.5 hours down to like the Oregon border to get used to it, And now it's like I can drive both wheels, which is great. It's a life skill.
Yeah, that's cool. I seem to remember Kate Fossen was recently visiting Seattle and got a ride in your van and showed some pictures of the stickers on the dashboard or something. And
she did,
and people commented when she posted that. They're like, "Where's the steering wheel?"
Yeah,
because she was sitting on the left side. That's funny.
It's awesome.
Awesome. So one thing I found interesting just from personal experience, but also through this podcast, is most entrepreneurs didn't get a degree in business, let alone a degree in entrepreneurship. They have a degree in some other thing, like it might be marketing or environmental studies or writing or, something like that. And then they ended up becoming an entrepreneur, sometimes by choice or maybe they had a plan to do that at some point, but often just by accident to some degree. However, you actually got a degree in entrepreneurship, which I feel like is strangely rare for entrepreneurs. So how do you feel like that degree kind of prepared you for the journey that you've been on? And out of curiosity, do you feel like there was any parts of that education that missed the mark?
Yeah. Yes to both. I think, so the degree was pretty easy because with the finance degree, it was like a couple additional electives. So that was sort of like an opt-in. And there were definitely some waste of time classes. I would say I took two things away from the degree and maybe one thing that could be useful to anybody who's going to start a company. And I like kind of consider it a Bible of starting a company of sorts. But the first one is in one class, they partnered an entrepreneurship student with an engineering student with a design student. And we created a product together. And that was cool. I will say, like, that was cool. Actually, the products we created were kind of sweet. I wish I still had them. We went to the University of Minnesota, and they were long sleeve t-shirts, and they were actually super cozy. And the pocket was like of the state of Minnesota, and it was like attached, and then there was like a little pocket, and they were actually like pretty cool and super cozy, as mentioned. So that was just like a good raw experience of like, this is what working with the team's like. You have to like source product and like figure out cost of goods sold and like design and actually figure out how to sell it and whatnot.
That's cool.
The thing though that I would say I took away that I still like, I would say it's a highly referenced book, is the Business Model Canvas. Have you heard of this?
Right. Yeah, I do. I think I have it.
Yeah. So that was like a required book for one class. And I have all the books in the series now. I think it's by like Strategizer is the name of it. And I just find like the concepts in that book to be super fundamental. To just like
Yeah.
running tests and like testing and like A/B testing and figuring out like, okay, like what are we going to do to sell the product, or like how are we going to source the product, and just like giving a really good simple sense of like kind of some of the basic steps to starting any sort of business. It's never that easy, but I think like for somebody who like really has no clue where to start, it could be a good spot.
Yeah, I recommend that to people all the time. But here's the pop quiz then. Did you actually fill out a business model canvas for Forij when you got started?
We have one. When I first got started, I want to say I probably put together some drafts that were trash, but that's how it goes.
Yeah.
In my task manager, I use ClickUp to manage tasks and follow up with leads. On a quarterly basis, it's linked to our business model canvas, and it's to update the business model canvas.
Ooh, interesting. Wait, so how does that work? So I don't know if I've used like a business model canvas software per se. I've seen the book and the worksheets that I've used. But are you saying there's like a business model canvas software that ClickUp
Mhm.
connects to somehow, and then as you're up? No.
I just
Okay.
yeah, I just have it in like a PowerPoint file. So like it's in a PowerPoint file, and then every
Mm.
quarter I'll make a copy of the slide, and then I'll just like shift it however the business has changed, or like how I'm thinking about the business, and it just is a like high level blueprint of like, am I thinking about everything right?
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So now the flip side of that question was, what do you feel like that education was missing? Like where they missed the mark now that you're an actual entrepreneur? Do you like look back on that and say, wow, they were really way off on this lesson or this principle that they taught us?
I think a lot of it is just like theoretical, um, where like, this Gage, just like
Yeah.
it's trench warfare out here. Like, how do you put somebody in a class to teach them how to go to war? I don't think so. Like, I think you just have to go to war. Like that that's sort of just what has to
Yeah.
happen if you really want to learn how to be good in war. Like, so I wish like, and I have aspirations of, well, being a kindergarten teacher, but I also have aspirations of for sure teaching entrepreneurship on a on a university level. And I think it would be
Mm,
like,
cool.
I would really challenge like I think it would be like a really challenging, like, you're out in the streets hustling to go build something concept, and like, like you could give like, the winners or something like $10,000 of your own money every single semester or something. But I would love to like
Oh,
create
that's
or
cool.
try and recreate like just a super real setting, and maybe have it be like an upper level entrepreneurship class where it's like people are really serious. I think the University of Washington, I feel like, has a really good program. Like, I hear about tons of companies that come out of that program, and like the students just continue running the companies for real, like after school, which is awesome. That's a
Nice.
successful program.
Yeah. There's some definitely good business schools around the country, and I found they're all different too. Like I've heard some schools still kind of teach the way business was run, 50 years ago, and like the 10 P's or 12 P's or whatever, like price placement, product promote, like all that kind of stuff. And then there are some schools who are like 4 P's. There you go. Well, I've heard some people extend it into others, and then there's Seth Godin has his own like the modern P's that he switches it
Like
to.
alt
And
MBA or
anyway, it's all
whatever.
over the place. But some schools, yeah, some schools are like teaching the new way and being experimental. Some are teaching the tried and true principles and so on and so forth. So I feel like if you're interested in business, you should like just go find the school that has the flavor of the style that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Otherwise, to your point, what I hear from a lot of MBA graduates is they say, if you really want to learn how to build a business, just go build a business. Like the MBAs are often great for networking and probably a requirement if you're trying to rise up the corporate ladders in a corporate environment. But if you're just trying to be an entrepreneur, just go get started, and you'll learn a lot, like you said, in the trenches. So,
Yeah, to take the money,
but anyway,
and go do there. I think another really good book for just like people who are thinking about it. Are you familiar with Alex Hormozy?
I'm not sure. Is
He
there
wrote
a
a book called
book you have in
$100
mind?
million offers. I just think he has some good
Oh,
frameworks in there, thinking about like, is this a good idea to start a business on or not? Just some fundamental questions to like get you started. It's a pretty easy read. So but yeah,
Gotcha.
go start the business.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. Yeah, I've always I thought about getting a dual MBA plus design degree, or not MBA, a dual business and design degree when I was in school, but the business school wouldn't let me do it at the time. They said just come back and do another degree afterwards. So I've always thought about it, but then I've never had a good enough excuse because I just constantly absorb business books, or I go through like incubator programs like 10,000 Small Businesses, and I just like learn that way by either doing or being part of communities, or having chats with other business owners. But I can't say that I've built the perfect business, but here we are 14 years later and still kind of thriving. So I must have done a few things right along the way. but I feel like part of the joy and burden of running a business is that it's a constant learning game, right? Even if you got a degree from the best business school in the world, you're not going to know this specific product category. You're not going to know this current marketplace. You're not going to know how to get through a pandemic like we just went through. Like all those things can't really be taught, right? You got to just be willing to hustle and learn in the moment, right? To be able to pivot, take whatever data is coming in and make some decisions, move forward, try it, see if it works. If it doesn't, try something else and move forward again.
Totally. Yeah, 1,000%. It's funny you say that, because if I were to go back to school, I think I would go back in a design capacity.
That's interesting, which I have seen is more common. Both design schools have started teaching more business, and business schools have started teaching more design. Like in my personal opinion, like there's a handful of degrees that go well together. And I think business, psychology, and design all kind of coexist so nicely that it would be amazing to just get like a joint degree in those three things. But you could also weave in all sorts of other things. Like if you want to do sustainability, like environmental science or something could be in there too. Or if you're in food, nutrition, etc.
Totally. Yeah, I like that.
So we could geek out on all the business stuff forever, I'm sure. But as we start wrapping up, one of the other things I wanted to touch on, because I think it's unique about your interest and background, is that you're also a psilocybin peer supporter, which is starting to get more traction. I even saw that Dr. Bronner's started covering employee mental health care through psilocybin treatments. And of course, Michael Pollan's book on how to change your mind and other things like that have come out and started making psychedelics more mainstream again, like bringing it back into our culture is not a something we need to be afraid of. So I love that you're a peer supporter and helping people go through their journeys. But can you talk a little bit about how you do that? Like, what does it mean to be a peer supporter?
Yeah. So I came in touch with a friend of mine named Saad, and he started a company called Silo Health. So Saad, he is a pharmacist, and he's also pretty active in the psychedelic community. And he started Silo Health to basically create like an authority that, and really a certifying body to create like a certification that anybody can go through to help others, go through these psychedelic trips. And the idea is to help democratize these sort of medicines. So, right now it's like you could go through a medicinal trip legally, but you go through with like a psychiatrist. There's only so many psychiatrists. It's really expensive. And so they built this really cool, robust program where like they certify psilocybin peer supporters. And so he's a friend. I'm super passionate about it. And so I joined one of the first cohorts and like went through the certification program. It was really cool, super robust. Like they give background, they give history, they give this the scientific processes, coping, like things that can go wrong, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was really great. I've always, have always believed in some of the medicinal powers of psychedelics. And so we went through that program, and then have since helped folks who have been interested in using psychedelics for medicinal purposes. So just last year, there was kind of one of the first major clinical studies was released, clinically showing that psilocybin can effectively reduce depression and anxiety. Which is awesome. Like it's really quite cool. And I think a lot more people are starting to become open-minded to that idea. And so, what I've really focused, or what I've kind of taken from the program, and where I've kind of really focused, and where I think there is kind of a larger group to be helped, and kind of to help take the first step, is actually in more of a microdosing program. So I have some, like, just some free programs that I've put together through the certifying program, where it's like, hey, if you're interested in not going through like a major psychedelic trip, right, that could be a huge step forward for a lot of people. I'm looking at like people like my mom
Yeah.
or dad, but are curious in these medicines and want to experiment with them in a way where, like, you're not going to get super high, like, during any day, and you can kind of continue your normal life, and you don't have to go to a retreat center. Are kind of helping people, like, think through, like, okay, like, what could, like, what kind of microdose regimen look like, and how could this be helpful. So that's kind of where, like, on a more personal basis, right, like, we don't use psychedelic mushrooms in any of our
Yeah.
products. That is where I kind of focus my time, and have kind of been working with people, to kind of help them kind of get involved, and start using these substances to really address some, like, pretty fundamental, mental illnesses, or sort of issues.
Yeah, that's great. Like, the science was looking very promising back in the 60s, and then, the culture of the time ended up pushing against it for various reasons, and now it's coming back in a stronger way around the world, with people getting back into that research and seeing all the benefits of it. So I think it's great, not only that more funding and money is going into the research, but people are more open to kind of be talking about this again, and that there are supporters and therapists out there to help people go through a journey, because, they always say it's, what is it, a set and setting, like, it's the context of how you do it can really influence the results of the process, right? So if you're trying to do it on your own and you don't know what you're doing, and you're scared, and you don't set up the right environment, it can just make things bad, or not a great experience, and then that'll taint how that person feels about it. But
Totally.
if you have someone really helping you through it, you can have better results through the process, and therefore get more benefits. So So I appreciate that you're doing that and helping folks through that journey.
And that's usually a telltale sign. It's like, you should not be experimenting if you are afraid. Like, you need to get over that fear before you start down this path. And that is, like, a step for people. And I think that's just something that, like, the whole mindset thing isn't super well understood, because there aren't really any other substances that are highly impacted by mindset. Obviously, it's not a perfect statement, but just generally speaking, mindset has a much bigger effect on your experience with psychedelics than it does other substances.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I know that we need to wrap up here. So to do so, I'm super curious, as Mr. Noggin Nutrition himself, I'm curious to know what you think the future of functional food looks like.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the future of functional food, I think it's going to become, more widespread, and I think available. I also think the word functional will be pretty broad in scope. So functional food could include added vitamins, or it could include things such as medicinal mushrooms. Where today, I feel like things that are functional are more like have CBD in them, or have some of these mushrooms in them. So I just think the idea of leveraging natural remedies and other substances in things that we already consume is just going to become mainstream. So to me, that's sort of what I feel. I really like your take on some of, like, the more of the legislation and policies around testing and transparency. I think that will as well be a sort of a wave that will be much needed. So yeah, I'm excited. I think you're already seeing a large, like, player moving in that direction. I think Olipop, like, I would consider them a functional beverage company. And so it's really cool to see what they're doing, and kind of leading the way in my eyes.
That's cool. Yeah. One thing I was just thinking of is, originally all food was probably functional, right? And then we started overly processing stuff and making it dysfunctional or damaging to our health. So as I was just thinking about the future of functional food, it occurred to me that what would be a really great outcome is that all food goes back to being functional. But like you said, there's so many different definitions of functional. We're just like on the early days of that right now, but I'm looking forward to seeing it expand.
On that too. And I know we're wrapping, but I know, like, I'm sure you just saw a bunch of like the erythritol news kind of been circulating.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sad, but yeah, hopefully we can get substances like that out of here.
Totally. I think we just need functional food that's real natural food, right? It doesn't have to be made in a lab, or it doesn't have to be an alternate to something else. It can just be the best quality version of that thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll wrap up here. So I appreciate you taking some time out of your scrappy, bootstrapped entrepreneur lifestyle to share some of your story with us. And I appreciate that you are out there focusing on the things that matter, like making people healthier, and bringing more happiness and joy into the world with your brand as well, which we didn't get a chance to dig into some of the projects you're going through with games, but maybe on the next time we have you on. So thanks for doing all that you're doing.
All right. Hey, should we fist bump through the cameras?
Absolutely. Boom, baby. Love it. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about Parker or his company, visit forij.co. That's forij.co. Subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channel for more innovator interviews, expert advice, and leadership discussions. If you like this episode, leave a heart, thumbs up, or review, and share it with your colleagues. As an ever-evolving show, we also love feedback, so send us your thoughts or ideas for who we should talk to next to evolve@modernspecies.com.